Hey, y'all, welcome to this episode of Corporate Quitter. Today's guest I have on is John Branch. He is a wedding photographer and a YouTube content creator. And I actually met him through our sponsor, Novo. They had a panel a couple of weeks ago back in May, and John and I were able to connect over that panel. I learned a lot about him. He's actually a father of five, which is wild, and he's a business owner and the sole provider of his family. So I immediately, after hearing his story and getting connected to him, I was like, I need to talk to him because one of the biggest things with many entrepreneurs is, right, the fear of like losing a home or having problems with finances or doing all these things for themselves, right? I started my entrepreneurial journey individually, right? It was just me to worry about. I was dating someone, sure, I had family, but I was mostly only concerned about my well-being, right? My finances, my health, my sort of reputation. But to then be a father and a father of five and be the sole provider, like, I can't imagine the pressure and stress that he's had to deal with over these years of being an entrepreneur. And so I just knew that I needed to talk to him and get some nitty-gritty details of like what it was actually like, and basically giving you a story to pull from, because if John can do it, then sure, you sure as hell can. John and I, we talk about nitty-gritty details about the photography business, what you can do to get started, what are some transferable skills in your current corporate job to help you on your entrepreneurial journey. But of course, we also get into details about money and finances and what to do when your industry changes, much like what's happening right now in the photography industry. So I really enjoyed having this conversation with John. He is like a calm powerhouse of a person. I wish I was as calm and collected as him, but I'm not. I just look at him and I'm like, wow, I want to be John one day. Like, really, what he's built and what he's done is super cool. So I hope you enjoyed this conversation. I sure did. And before we get started, of course, as always, I want to thank our sponsor, Novo. Have our little card right here. They are my current business bank account that I use. I didn't have a bank account in my business for 3 years, and only this past, I think it was February, maybe March, I finally signed up because a friend of mine recommended them. And I was like, finally, a bank, that I actually trust and believe in. And over the past few months, I've gotten to know the team pretty well. And it's actually wild. Like, the fact that this business, this banking institution, if you will, they're not really a bank, they're a fintech company, but they do a banking feature. So I call them a bank, but technically they're not. But this bank, they got it together. Like, they are here for the people. They are here for you and I and small businesses. And so that's part of the reason why we've teamed up and why I'm advocating so aggressively for them, because I have yet to find another business solution that actually has the team and the people as powerfully as the product that they have kind of backing them. And I don't say that lightly, because over the course of my 3 years doing this, I rarely did brand deals. I didn't really do sponsorship stuff. I've been really, really particular about the people that I've worked with, because I'm not trying to work for a company or sponsor a company or do any sort of partnership with a company that at their core is bad, right? No, no, no. We're not doing that, right? But this company at its core, I've literally met the CEO in person, wonderful human being with great energy, great vibes, great story. Like, I actually think I want to bring him on the podcast because his story to becoming a business owner is wild. But either way, I don't want to talk too much about this. Let's get into today's episode with John. Again, John is also a Novo account holder. That's how we got connected. But anyway, let's get into today's episode. Hey, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Corporate Quitter. I'm really excited to have John on today. We connected through a panel we did with Novo, who actually is the sponsor for this episode. Thank you, Novo. But I think John's story is just really interesting. He's been doing entrepreneurship for quite a while, so there's a ton that I've to learn from him, and a lot of you as well, just about quitting, navigating his business, which is photography. And we're going to get into some details about some other not so sexy things that happen in entrepreneurship that I think need to be talked about more openly. But thank you so much for coming on, John. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So I figured, since we're, corporate quitter, we'll jump into the big thing, the meaty thing, which is actually talking about quitting. So, right, you made the bold decision to quit your previous job pretty abruptly, you said, right? So what were some of the key factors that led to that decision, and how did you handle the transition? Because it's not an easy one, right? It's pretty,
Yeah,
it's a
it's
big
not
one.
easy. I think key factors came into first off was just my own life and family life. At the time I had two kids, and the place I was living at was just like it was like a two-family household, and the people under us was mad all the time if we made like even the tiniest noise, which when you have two little kids, that's kind of near impossible.
Yeah.
There was that. And then there was just the corporate life in itself. I've always been like a creative. I majored in music production and sound design. And just while I loved my job, corporate just moves so slow. And as a creative, you're like thinking of things and you're like, this would be great to implement. And this is how it would work. And this is what we would gain from it. And they would always hit you with the like, oh, well, you need to make a plan and we have to have 50 meetings about it. And then you have to test it. And then you have to get people on your team to take. And it's just the absolute, I hated every moment of that. So those two factors for me were really like the big pushes to just like, I can't do this no more.
Yeah. Especially, I can imagine too, like being at Squarespace, right? Because you were previously at Squarespace and in tech, like those industries, they are on the quote unquote faster and more innovative side, but that doesn't mean they churn any quicker than, let's say, like your financial
Exactly.
institutions and things like that. And I had a similar issue of just like, we're talking about like there are issues in the company and things not being effective or productive or whatever. And yet you want to make changes, but then when it really comes down to it, you're not wanting to and you miss kind of the mark or that moment
Oh my
actually,
God. I hate it
eh,
so much.
yeah, and I mean, we'll get into this later, but I mean, there's definitely sometimes a bad or like not a bad, but it's sometimes not so great because in entrepreneurship, you could just on a dime, like flip on a switch, do something. And sometimes it's not the best thing. Like sometimes it's actually good to pump the brakes. But just for people out there who are wanting to quit their jobs, are there any skills or experiences, right? Those transferable skills and knowledge that came from being in corporate that actually benefited your photography business? Because I think sometimes finding the dots to align if they don't have that specific background can be difficult. But was there anything that was just like, oh my God, I didn't realize this was going to be super helpful, but actually changed the entire way I do business?
Oh yeah. I would say even specifically because I'm a wedding photographer and what I come to find, I've been doing it for about 10 years now, is that wedding photography is more customer service than it is taking pictures.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of what I was doing at Squarespace, because I was a team lead in customer service, a lot of that stuff transferred almost one to one. And that's actually something I like to remind people about because I know you might be at your job now and you hate every moment of it, but try your best to glean what skills you can because it's always surprising that when you start doing it yourself, like I can remember when I would have like, let's say an unhappy bride and we're like emailing back and forth, that took me right back to being Squarespace team lead with the customer who's like totally lost it. And someone on my team is like, I can't handle this anymore. So I'm escalating it up to the manager, and it would come to me and I'd have to write these whole book level, emails pointing out everything that happened. Is that like, it took me right back to that. I was like, oh, this is the same. I've done this before. So a lot of the customer service, especially, yeah, most jobs are service based. So if you work in customer service, you are learning skills to be an entrepreneur by yourself as well.
Mhm. I hadn't even thought about that. I actually when we talk more about strategy around business, I definitely wanna get into, like, how to manage, like, clients that are kind of like a pain in the ass, right? They're just like also managing expectations, which I'm sure is a massive thing in the photography business, but just
Yeah.
for because 'cause we're here now, we're right in this moment of talking about quitting and stuff like that. What was, like, the pivotal moment that was like, "Okay, I'm gonna do photography," right? Because you said your background's in audio and kind of music production. And then you're at Squarespace doing customer service sort of thing. So how does that kind of translate into photography? Like, were you doing photography as a hobby on the side? Like, what was the thing that got you that your first paying client too that actually was like, okay, this is a business. It's not just, whatever.
Yeah. Okay, I'll try not to talk your ear off. This is a longer answer.
No, this is good. No, please
So
tell us the story. We love a juicy story.
so again, I was doing audio. So I was music producing, recording stuff. And because of that, I ended up moving to New York. I was in Boston at the time. I went to Berklee College of Music. And so I went to New York to pursue audio. I'd never really taken pictures before, aside from like I have an old Polaroid 600. That's the big chunky one. I think it's the big squares that come out. So I
It's
was
funny. I'm
using
looking.
that.
I have one of the old ones up there too. It's like ancient. It's literally like the old Nokia phones you could run over. That's how thick it is. So like,
Yeah, that was like my first camera. So I was familiar with photography, but I was not a photographer. So when my wife and I got pregnant with our first child, she was very much like, I would love to stay home. At that time, I was working at Squarespace. I had actually given up on audio at that point because I was working at a audio post-production house. So that's like making the audio sound good for like TV shows and commercials. That ended up not really working out. So I was just at Squarespace at the time. I used to work at Apple, but I had stopped that as well. So she was like, I would love to stay home. And I was like, great, I'd be great to support that. Let me get a second job. And she was like, no, start a business. And so I was like, well, I like photography. I don't really know it, but I thought it was cool. And I've had people tell me that like I had a good eye for it. So I took some time to actually sit down and learn it. And so really I got into it. That's why I get all these questions from photographers and they're like, "Oh, tell us about the art and the feeling." I'm like, I got into it to pay the bills, like I'm
Yeah.
trying to pay the bills. So while I am an artist, I do multiple arts and photography was never my first. I never went to school for photography. I just kind of jumped into it because it made sense. Now, the longer part of the answer too, talking about like business side, is I had started a small business while I was doing audio post production to try and show the place I was working for that I could do the things they were asking of me. Because a lot of times I ended up doing like cleaning toilets and coffee, and they wouldn't call me to help them. So I would be like, hey, look, I started my own business doing what y'all are doing. Look at me doing it. I can do it. I can do it like you want me to do it. And I learned the hard way that when you choose to pay your dues and become the free work person, you will always be the free work person. So I
Yeah.
was doing like audio for, like short films and stuff and documentaries for free, which was the worst. So when I started photography, the biggest promise to myself was I was not doing anything for free. Unless for some reason it was like something that I thought was a great choice. Like one of my wife's good friends was getting married. I was like, I'll do that that's fine. But anything else, you're paying me $50 at least, something.
Mhm.
Because I feel like that mentality of like, I'm doing free work just gravitates free work towards you versus I'm going to get paid. And that's kind of how I started. I was using stuff like Groupon, and there's another service called Thumbtack that I was using to just find like any kind of couples getting married or engagements or whatever. And yeah, it just took off from there.
Do you think that you doing your wife's friend's wedding helped to kind of set the stage for getting the understanding of what it takes to being a wedding photographer and determine that you actually want to do wedding photography? Like, was there a moment of like, oh, I know I want to do photography, but I'm not sure what kind, or you always knew you wanted to do wedding specifically?
Yeah, when I started, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do, but I knew it involved people. I
Hmm.
ended up trying a fair amount of people portrait styles. So I did newborn photography, which is super hard. Like it's so hard. That did not work. And I only had one kid at the time too, so I was just like, "Oh god, babies." And then what else? I did families, which are fine, but it's a 50-50 shot because if the kids hate you, the session is the worst. And there's no tell. Like I'll have
Hmm.
sessions that were great and other sessions where the kids were just like, "I don't like this guy." And I was just like, "Oh my god." So yeah, after doing a couple of that, I did engagements and it was like, "Ah, this is cool." And then I did weddings. My first wedding was like $500 in Central Park, and it was just short, and that was fine. And yeah, my second one was my wife's friend, and that one was okay. And then yeah, I booked a couple who I was at their engagement session and they kept asking me if I did weddings, and I was like, "Not really." And they're like, "Great, we want to book you." So, but it was like a year out, so I had time to practice within it, and that was like my first true full on wedding.
Yeah. Now, when it comes to like building out your photography business, because you've been doing it for quite a while, right? And those beginning clients are always the hardest just because you have to prove yourself and also figure out, is this
Yeah.
actually something I want to do? And you get involved in all that. Do you have any suggestions in terms of marketing strategies for getting new clients? Has it been mostly referral based? Is it like doing what you do online? Because I know you have a pretty big digital presence. Like, what would you say have been kind of those milestone makers and movers, especially in the beginning and even now?
I think in the beginning, and again, using services like Groupon and Thumbtack, maybe Yelp, those services, they're not the best, but they're great to start with.
Mhm.
It gave me a lot of visibility into couples, which helped get like my first reviews in. It helped me build my portfolio so people could see like stuff I've done. After that, it's a combination of word of mouth and digital presence. I didn't really get into the YouTube side of my digital presence until maybe 3 years ago, but before then, it was all just Instagram and stuff, which is it's a lot harder now because you have to make reels and things too, but just
Yeah.
being online and visible in your area, and then when you do get a wedding, posting it online, tagging the venue, the planner, the makeup art, like, tag as many people as possible because I think sometimes photographers forget after a wedding day, we're the only one who holds, like, everything that was there. The flowers
Mhm.
die, the food's gone, the planner goes home, the venue kicks you out. Like, all you really have is the photos. So sharing those with everyone else who worked with you is a huge, it goes a long way because then they post it and then someone's like, I like this venue. They see your photo, they find you, so on and so forth.
Yeah. I think the really cool thing too online, the benefit about Instagram and stuff like that, sure, it's hard, but you have a lot of lurkers. And then you're kind of plant the
Yeah.
seed for future use when that person does, get engaged, does get married, all of those things. Or even if they're single right now and then they think, oh, John, like in the future, that might work out. But so, there's one thing of like posting online and marketing yourself and all that stuff. But in the beginning, would you say getting reviews and like the portfolio down is probably the most important? Or would you say like just go straight into doing digital marketing? Or does there kind of like, I guess my other question that kind of folds into this is like, how do you as a photographer even set your business apart from others? How do you highlight your branding and stuff so that people want to work with you versus just being, a unique photographer in X location?
That's the hardest part. That's I do say leaning into the portfolio reviews helps because reviews that helps on the business side of it, but because it is photography, you kind of have to approach the art side as well, and then that's where the portfolio comes in, making sure that your work is really good and kind of holds the essence of what you're going for. So like your marketing and your branding, your verbiage, your copy, all of that should like coincide with your photos, which is actually one of the hardest parts I think of photography, but it's what every brand does, like so I worked at the Apple stores. I started in '07, and that was closer to when they were really starting to push the stores. The stores now are like common day. You're like, "Oh yeah, Apple store." But they were so very specific about their image along with their marketing and like how the computers look, like everything has a very clean, specific look where like if someone showed you a product without the Apple logo on it, you would know it was Apple. It's
Hmm.
that kind of thing that you're striving for as a photographer. Like I need people to see the photos and be like, oh yeah, this is John's work. I know this. And just immediately, because when you get, like you said, a lurker, that's what's gonna happen. They're gonna follow you for a while, and then eventually you'll get to a point where they'll just get fed some of your work, and they'll immediately be like, "Oh, I love this," and be like, "Oh, funny, that was John. I knew it was John. I felt everything from it." Like you have to have that immediacy, and it's like that with every brand, right? Like any brand, you see their work or their products, and you're immediately like, "Yes, this is it. This is what I want," and then you realize it's from that brand. You're like, "Oh, go figure."
Yeah. Now with photography, you mentioned customer service before. So how much of I mean, obviously people pay you for your photography skills, but do you find that as a brand itself, they are hiring you, John, as the individual as well? Like they're like, okay, I like this person, I like what he stands for, sort of thing. Is it a all-encompassing sort of brand sort of package, or is it just explicitly the aesthetics of it?
Yeah, it's definitely the person too. People rather book someone that they like and can like vibe with. Cause that's the thing too. I even tell a lot of couples when I'm having like a meeting with them before booking, like out of all the people on your wedding day who's going to spend the most time with you, it's usually the photographer. Like we're there when you're getting ready and dressed, and we're there all the way up to the end. The planner will disappear after a while because they got things to do, but like we're like up on you the whole time
Mhm.
in your face. So like if you don't like me, if you just don't want to talk to me, or you're like, oh, it's that guy, like I'm probably not a good choice as your wedding photographer. So, and I've actually found that since I've started doing YouTube, a lot of the couples who contact me who found me from YouTube are much hotter leads because they've had enough time to get to know me through my YouTube videos. And at that point, they're pretty much like, yeah, we don't need you to tell anything about the services you provide and stuff because we've already seen enough of it on YouTube. We've seen your work. You're a cool guy. Like, where do we sign up, basically?
Mhm. Which is like the ultimate goal of like, not that you're not going to have conversations because I'm sure it's a two-way street. You want to work with people that you enjoy, who have, all these things that are on a positive rather than
Yeah.
negative, right? No bridezillas, none of that stuff. But it's especially in the beginning when you're just starting to get clients and stuff, there's definitely that aspect of like you're just kind of throwing spaghetti against the wall and seeing what sticks and like just trying everything and like you're like, I don't necessarily care if they like me or not, and I don't care if I like them. I kind of need this to go and work. But I guess that kind of leads into my next question of just like, I think you and I had talked about briefly, and I've seen this with other photographer friends of mine too, is there's been a lot of industry changes, which has changed the way that photographers do business. So not just like, sure, digital presence and showing more of your personality and not just having your portfolio online, right? That's important. But what are some of the biggest changes over the past few years with COVID and kind of this emergence of reels and stuff that maybe have made either the business boom or really, really difficult?
Mm, such a hard question because there's so many things that changed. I mean, I would say the biggest thing I've seen is a lot of the way that we can edit as photographers, like editing our photos. Clearly, and we all know this, AI is like changing absolutely everything right now.
Oh, yeah.
And like even I use an AI tool now that literally learns how I edit and then edits for me like I
No
would.
way.
Yeah.
That's so
And
cool.
it takes
I
like
mean, it's
8 hours
scary
of my
though.
work. Yeah, it's insane. Like it takes 8 hours of my work and turns it into 10 minutes. And I do have to go back and double check the photos and make sure they're fine, but, like, literally, it does it. It's kinda scary. What else has changed? I mean, I think the visibility into things. So, actually, it's funny because I just made a video about this yesterday. I don't know if you've seen the whole, like, sepia bride or sepia gate drama thing happening in the photography industry.
No,
Um,
what is it? I know sepia, like the filter. I know that, but I mean,
yeah.
what do you mean by that?
So
What's the drama? What's the tea, John?
so there's this bride who's on TikTok basically blowing up this photographer's spot because she hired the photographer and she liked her work. But then when she got the photos back from the wedding day, they were just like super orange and everything was kind of shadowy. Like she couldn't see her face as well. And she didn't like the way the colors turned out. And so now there's this huge back and forth that they're having with each other. But that's a big thing that is changed now too, is that if you have issues like these with your couples, because I've had it happen to me, it's not just you all dealing with it anymore. Now they can hop on TikTok or something and,
Mhm.
like, make a whole video about it. But, yeah, it's a whole back and forth. Basically, the bride was like, "I don't like this. Give me all the photos in RAW." And then the bride edited some of the photos to look how she wants them to, but it's, like, totally different than how the photographer edits. And so the photographer's like, "Well, that's not what you signed up for. You signed up for what I do, which is like this." And it's this whole thing. They might be going to court. I think the,
Wow,
photographer's gonna
really?
sue the bride for defamation,
I
which
mean,
a
technically
lot of
she can
times.
because, like, TikTok I mean, the that's nuts. I mean, the fact
Yeah,
that that's like that, that could be I mean, there are positives of that, of, like, if people do a shit job and they're not good people, hopefully they get called out on their shit, but, like,
yeah,
that's a really sticky situation of, like especially when it comes to creative, like, I don't know. I and also people change. So, right, you hire a photographer and then you see something else that's buzzing on the internet, but you've already hired them to do X thing, and then I'm
true.
sure when it's done, they're like, "Oh, wait, I actually wanted to change this," or "This happened," or I don't know.
Yeah, and that's the hard part about the whole situation is it's not easy to just be like, "Well, the photographer's right." Like, it's very kinda thin line on both ends.
Mhm.
So, it's unfortunate for everyone that it's just on the internet like that, but so that's
Yeah.
another part that's changed as well.
That's terrifying, honestly, because a lawsuit in some instances for small businesses can be the end of their business. Like,
Yep.
I mean, there's one thing to stay resilient during a pandemic or through financial hurdles, but there's another when it's like, how do you come back from a lawsuit or that level of, kind of like defamation? That's like, how do your reputation is ruined. What do you do?
Yeah,
If it is, right? Maybe she recouples it, but still, there's so many people who have seen it. It's hard.
the worst.
I mean, now that we're on the topic of kind of that and customer service and stuff, like what are some of your experiences with difficult couples or difficult experiences, bad weather, things like that? How have you been able to kind of manage that, or do you have any kind of tricks or tips you can give new photographers who have to navigate those sticky
Yeah.
situations so it doesn't
Oh my
escalate to
god.
that level or something?
Yeah, and that's the biggest thing I think I try and tell photographers is especially when you're starting, you just have to really remember that wedding photography especially is customer service. I'd say 85% customer service and not even a full 10% for photos really. That's like the least that you do. Because I had my own situation that was basically very near what's happening with the whole sepia bride thing. And a lot of it's just customer service and knowing when to cut your losses. There's that and being able to be in control and calm. I think a big thing I did wrong when I first started, which is why I had my own situation, is that when you become a photographer, you have this idea in your mind with weddings that like you don't want to bother the wedding. You want to
Hmm.
just let it happen. And there's a degree of that that you do want, but on the same end, you're being hired as the professional to make sure you get certain photos. So you can't just sit back and be like, "Oh, I don't wanna bother nobody," and then stuff doesn't happen, and because of that, you don't get photos.
Mhm.
And then the couple's like, "Hey, did you get a photo of this thing?" You can't be like, "Well, grandma was taking too long and I didn't want to bother." Like no one's going to they don't want to hear that. They're like, "I
Mhm.
hired you to take the photos." So as long as you're not being obnoxious, there's like this amount of hand holding you have to do to a wedding to make sure you're getting what you need as a photographer, but then also not taking away from the day. But you have to do it. Any photographer's like, "Oh, well, I don't wanna do that. I wanna be just documentary style." You can do that, but you have to make sure you're getting what you need, because you
Mhm.
can't make excuses after the fact and say, "Well, like, I couldn't get it because you wouldn't let me." Like that,
Mhm.
no one wants to hear that.
Yeah. Also, I think a wedding is such a stressful day to begin with. If you can mitigate any little bit of friction to getting a final product or at least having a day that's the way that they wanted, I mean, not only are they going to speak about you positively to others, but then they're also going to be probably happier with you in general because you kind of went above and beyond in this sort of like innate nature of taking care of another human being, sort of, I
Yeah.
guess.
So here's a small example of the kind of stuff. So I had booked this couple, and the couple, they didn't really want to take a lot of photos. They were much more like, just capture what's happening. They'll be fine. We'll take some family photos, it'll be whatever. But the mom really wanted some photos out in this like courtyard area of the venue. It rained that day. Luckily, it stopped. We're like at reception time. So we've already taken photos with the couple when it was wet and stuff. We did stuff inside. Couple doesn't want to take photos. They want to party. They're chilling now. They're trying to eat. And I had this one small moment to take them outside because it was dry enough to get that courtyard shot that the mom really wanted. And so I had this split second of like, I can either bother my couple or I can be like, well, they don't want to be bothered and not ask them. So I ended up bothering them, a nice bother, like, hey,
Hmm.
your mom really wanted this shot. Like, do you mind stepping outside for literally like 2 minutes? And they ended up going and doing it, and the mom was super great. It's like that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
Like the old me when I started, I would have been like, "Oh, I don't want to bother them. They don't want to take photos." And then I would have had to deal with the mom being like, "There wasn't a picture of this." And then usually the couple will side with the mom at that point, and now everybody's mad when all I had to do was ask. At
Hmm.
worst, they would have told me no, but see, then I have them on my side because then when the mom's like, "I wanted this photo," they'd be like, "No, mom, you were asking for too much," Like, so
Which is
it's
also
that's the
typical
hand
in
holding.
weddings. It's
Yeah,
parents
oh
like to get
gosh.
involved in things that they shouldn't be, but,
It's the
which is
worst.
a whole 'nother thing. Like, I can only imagine. I've only been to a few weddings, actually. I'm 31, but I've only been to a couple weddings, and thankfully, the ones I've been to have been pretty low key, but I've heard some terrible I've heard of terrible things that happen at weddings. Like, the drama, it's nuts. It's nuts. And you get to witness it, right? You get to capture it,
Oh
but
my goodness. I'm glad I've only had the smallest amount of, like, issues at a wedding day because it can be the worst. And you're,
yeah.
like, there and, like, when people pop off on each other and it's awkward, but you're there, and
Mhm.
then you still have to work, you're like, "Well, so let's keep taking the." It's like, "Oh, no."
Oh, it's like the equivalent of like, when you're younger and like you're hanging out with your friend at their house and like the mom starts yelling at them and you're just like,
You're just in the back.
yeah, you're just like, okay, I'll wait till you finish yelling at them and then like, do you want to play video games? Like, should we order pizza? Like, it's like, I don't know, like it's a weird, but in a professional setting, it's even more awkward. But I want to kind of like twist things for a second and kind of navigate towards money, which is a major thing for a lot of people, not only in this economy, but obviously the photography business is very lucrative and it's changed a lot since COVID. I think, like you had said,
Yep,
because of COVID halting weddings, basically, there was an
yep.
influx of weddings, the past few years, and now that's kind of slowing down a bit. But before we get into like that and having to navigate, the flow of that, how do you determine pricing structures and what are factors that you consider when setting your rates? Because I could imagine, let's say we talk about the sepia bride too. Like in that case, if it's things are going, kind of haywire, would you just take the loss, take the L and like not have them pay for it? Or is it already set and done? What are some things that new photographers should also take into account, whether it's transportation, I don't know, certain wedding attire, if at all you need that, lenses, I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, it's so much. It's so much. If I were to sit down and talk about gear, that could be its own, like, whole show, but,
Well, he does have John has a YouTube, so go look at it if you're looking for gear suggestions. But
it's
just in
it's
terms of
so
pricing
much.
structure, rough idea of how someone can, some top things they should really think about that you didn't in the beginning.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is you have to section out how much money you need to live and how much money you need to run the business, which luckily something like wedding photography, there's a fairly low bar to entry. At most, you just have to get, your cameras, SD cards, backup hard drives. So like you are going to spend a fair amount of money, but after that, think about your expenses for the day of itself and then also what you'll need to live off of. Take that and then look into your area, see who the top paying people are, and see who like some of the lower photographers are, and then try and set somewhere in the middle there. But then also set yourself based off of experience. And experience is honestly the main thing you're paying for as a wedding photographer. Because even me talking about how I was when I started versus where I'm at now, like the way I control a wedding day now and know what's going to happen and when it's going to happen and when to take the picture. Like I know the pictures before they even happen because I've seen it so many times at this point. So for that, you're charging more. And that's kind of how you base it. Cause even so let's break down my pricing a little bit, right? So I'm charging like 6,500 a wedding. That's like a typical 8-hour wedding. If they want more, obviously the price will go up based on the
Mhm.
hours. So I do normally set like an hour rate for just the wedding day itself. Then there's also the editing time. But as far as expenses, I normally include an album. The album costs me about $400 to $500. So that's written into that price.
Mhm.
I usually have a second photographer, which also costs me about $500. So that's written into the price. And then I have to drive there to, if it's long, you add travel to the price. So it's not always just a flat 6,500. So I already took out $1,000 of the 6,500. And so that's what I mean by like thinking about what you need to live on as well. So, I could sit down and be like, okay, I charge 6,500 a wedding. And if I did 20 weddings, I'd make 100,000. That's not real math, just throwing out random
Yeah.
numbers. But, like I would sit down and figure that out and then be like, okay, and my expenses per wedding is about this much. So I actually would be making that much. Then take 30% out for taxes. And then that's what you're left with. And so what you're left with, that's what you should be really looking at, being like, okay, I can take a portion of this for the business and a portion of this for me. And then you go from there.
Mhm. Now, when it comes to like efficiency in business, right? You said you use AI tools. Are there other things that you've used or even tech that has like changed the game in terms of like, right, trimming down your time on these things? Obviously, the wedding, you can't cut corners with that, but I'm sure
Yep.
hiring the second photographer does help so that you can kind of like the stress level goes down and you can actually take a
Yeah.
piss, right? Middle of the wedding, like so you don't miss moments. But is there anything like you can maybe share on when it comes to running a lean business, especially for like newbies? There's obviously the budgeting, which you just explained, which is helpful, but just to
Yeah.
mitigate any financial challenges or, upheavals they might have by overspending in the beginning.
There's a lot of tools and just a lot of products out now. And I would say finding like the one or two that work for you is kind of the way to go and not leaning on buying like a new preset every other day or a new lens. I think the gear part is probably the worst because it's easy to tell yourself, like, I need this camera, it'll make whatever better. Whereas, like, I've been using the same flashes for the last like 8 years. Actually, it's been longer than that. But you know what I mean? Like, buy the thing that works and keep it. Same with the AI editing. Like, just find one and use it. Get yourself a client management system and find one and use it, and that's it. Get yourself a good like banking system somewhere where you can track with your money. Because even like the sponsor with
Mhm.
Novo reserves and stuff, being able to set money aside, because I think that's where I messed up at first a lot too. It was hard for me to see how much money I had saved for taxes
Same.
because I just had like everything in the one banking account, and then you get to like the end of the year and you're like, oh God, taxes, and you're like, oh no. So like being able to separate your money out. And I think that's really the biggest thing. A good AI service that will help you save time, a good client management system, a good banking budgeting system. And that should be it,
Mhm.
really. Like I have a lot of services that I have that I need to kind of truncate down. I'm trying to lean up some. And yeah, those are the big three that like I just could never get rid of.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, as a business, right, you're always trying to do more. And so that, add subscriptions and the subscription costs, even though it's like $10 here, $5 here, $20 here, all of a sudden you're like, how am I spending $300 a month on subscriptions? just for my
Yeah.
business, not even for my Netflix and my Hulu and my gym. Like, it's crazy how much it adds up. And I'm in the same process too of whittling a lot of things down. And like on it, like again, not to bring Nova in, but like I was using HoneyBook at one point, and I think that was like $30 a month. Plus they do processing fees and all that stuff. And so then
Yep.
now that I can just do invoicing in Novo for free, I'm like, cool, that saves me like $120 for the year, like whatever it is, which is not a lot, but it is something, right? Especially when it
Yep.
comes to taxes and whatever bills, and you got to buy a new flash or these little things, right? It adds up. But I'm wondering, now that we're on the topic of money, I definitely want to take some time to talk about being basically you're the sole provider in your household, right? You're a father of five, which in my eyes is nuts. I literally just got a cat last week. And I'm like, is this parent? Like, it's only one single cat that doesn't talk and shits in a litter box. Like, it's so easy in comparison to being a dad and adding the stress of being a business owner. I can't even imagine the financial challenges, the emotional, mental challenges. I mean, thankfully you have a wonderful partner you said is super supportive, but like,
Yeah.
can you just talk about sort of the difficulty, like the financial and emotional pressure that comes with being a father and having a single income and doing this on your own?
Oh my goodness. I mean, clearly, as you can imagine, there's a lot of pressure. And luckily, again, like you were saying, like me and my wife are very much on the same page about our money and budget. And we're very open about all of our money and budget too, which helps. And I, to a fault, am like overly optimistic. And I think that helps because, yeah, if I wasn't, I think I would have a hard time sometimes. Because even, especially just to be candid about it, this year for me has been really hard because there's this thing we've been calling in the wedding industry called the engagement gap, because generally couples take 4 years before they get married. So like dating for 4 years. But since 2020, a lot of couples who would have probably gotten together at that time didn't because people weren't going anywhere. So now we're in that same 4 year gap and no one's engaged because no one was dating. No, the whole industry for engagement rings is down. So there's just not as many weddings. So I get to watch the money every day, like kind of dwindle down, and I'm not making as much as usual. But again, I'm like superly optimistic because even I was just telling my wife that the other day, like I'm very much the type of person where like I see the fire, the dog in the room, like this is fine.
Yes,
Like
this is,
that's
oh
that's
my God,
kind of
yes.
me.
The burning of it all down, and you're just like, cool, we're just here for the ride. Like, let's just see what happens.
Yeah, we'll have like a budget meeting, me and my wife, every now and then. I'll just be like, I understand that I'm a very calm person and like it's rare to see me freak out, but just so you know, like the money's not moving like it was before. She's like, "Oh, I thought it was fine because you don't freak out." Yeah, that's my fault. I'm a very low stress, calm person. So even when it's bad, I have to like make sure people understand how bad it is because I'm not gonna be like, "Oh," like I'm pretty
Yeah.
much just like, it's really bad. They're like, "Are you sure it's bad?" Like, no, no, it's not. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, like, what's great, and this is the biggest thing, especially I love like the topic of your podcast in general. The biggest thing I've learned from corporate quitting and being my own boss, especially watching the news now, is I can't get laid off. Like a
Yeah.
lot of my friends are like, I don't know how you do it. Your money's unstable. I'm like, it's more stable to me. You got to wait a whole year for your 2% raise.
Yeah.
I can go make more money if I feel like it.
Yep.
All I got to do is figure out what to do, where to market, and how to work harder at it and work harder, not smarter. And I could like double or triple my income
And
in
you could pivot
months.
too. Like, let's say the wedding
Yeah,
industry, you were like, actually, I don't want to wait another 4 years for this to turn around. I want to, in the 3 years, do something else. And you do headshots because everyone's being laid off and they need new heads. Like, I don't know. There's always a market gap. There's always something to be used. And not that, again,
exactly.
not speaking for you, but I think that's the benefit about being an entrepreneur is that you get to, like we talked about before, there are no processes that take a literal year long to do and change. You can literally change it today and implement it tomorrow. So I mean,
Exactly.
there's obviously challenges that come with all of this, but I mean, that's the beauty of having kind of, how would I say, like you just have complete choice. You have complete autonomy over what you do and how you do it. But
Yeah.
I mean, do you find the way that I'm seeing this in a lot of different industries too, this sort of gap, or as you say, like the fire burning kind of every industry in certain ways is like they talk about sometimes the clearing, right? They're clearing out the people maybe who are taking up space who shouldn't, or I don't even want to frame it like
Yeah.
that, but like, the people who are strongest, the people who are most committed, the people who have the best in terms of their quality, in terms of their customer service, will maintain their business. They will find a way out of this and they will benefit from sticking with it. Do you find that that's kind of what's going to happen? It's this trimming of the fat, or do you think the industry itself is going to change as a result? And so you're going to pivot? Like, what do you think on that?
It's definitely a bit of both. Because one of my theories of why it's harder to book weddings right now is that I think a lot of couples are now being more strict on their budgets.
Hmm.
And also on top of that, there's a lot of people looking for like different side hustles. And photography has no bar to entry. Like if you have a camera, you can go take photos and charge someone for it. Like there's no test you got to take or anything. So I think there's a lot of people jumping into photography as like a side hustle and eating up a lot of couples who are now like, well, I'm not trying to pay these higher amounts. And I think that's definitely changing the industry a bit. But on the same end, it's trimming the fat because a lot of people are finding out that like, yeah, you do kind of need an actual photographer who knows what they're doing.
Hmm.
So it's hard to say what's going to happen in the industry. I feel like it is going to come back, but every time I talk to any photographers who I, they're like pretty big in the industry, I've been surprised at how many of them are like, yeah, we just have no work. It's
Hmm.
like slowed down so heavily. Also, too, I think there was another TikTok about, and I never really saw this one. It was about just like how much photographers charge. There's something changing in the industry where like we're all gonna, and again, I talked to you about it before, like in 2020 everyone moved to 2021 weddings, and everyone who was planning to get married in 21 rushed for it. Everyone who was planning to get married in 22 probably rushed for it in 21 because they thought we were going to get locked down again.
Hmm.
So photographers too, we got a big wake up call, and I think it happened to every industry, right? 2021 to 22, every industry was popping. Everyone was raising their rates. Everyone's like, we're making so much money. We're like hiring all these people. And then like the end of 22, 23 is when it started like coming back down. And everyone was like, oh, we went too fast. Like
Hmm.
I booked too much and I mean, even I went through it. Like I traveled for a lot of my weddings and I was flying first class, like every flight. I didn't, but I was like, I was feeling myself, like 2021, everything was popping. It was so good. So yeah, I think there's a big wake up call for a lot of wedding photographers where we have to dial back. I even dropped my prices a little bit just to kind of match the market some. And yeah,
Do you
there's
think
definitely trimming of fat happening.
Yeah. Do you think that, like, you having your digital presence has helped in, like, basically keeping you busy on a day-to-day basis? Because I can imagine as a photographer, like, your day-to-day is, like, you're taking calls, you're having inquiry meetings, like, scouting out new clients, maybe doing cold pitching, creating content, but with it being a gap in work, like, I guess, what are you looking towards, or how are you spending your days then to kind of obviously position yourself better, but obviously so you don't go insane? Because, like, I'm
Yeah.
sure 5 kids is amazing, having a partner at home is amazing, but, like, it's nice to have your alone time, and that's why you have your office and do what you
Yeah.
do, right? I mean, and speaking from minimal
Close the
experience, but
door.
as someone who
Daddy's
likes to
working.
be Yeah. So, how do what do you do on a day-to-day basis when work is slow?
Oh, goodness. So, yeah, it's funny too because technically, since I'm doing 2 jobs now with content creation and wedding photography, if I only had wedding photography, I would probably be a lot more stressed out than I am now. Because, like I said, I booked only 2 weddings this year, and I finished them by April. So, at this point in the year, this is when it starts picking up, and I should be super busy, but I don't have photos to edit, and I don't have anything to do, and so all I'm doing on the photography side is looking at my website and optimizing it, making sure the SEO looks good, trying to do blog posts. Because really, aside from marketing, you're just kind of waiting for people to contact you.
Mhm.
I got in contact with a local magazine. I did a style shoot for them for one of their magazines, and hopefully that'll be coming out next year. So, so doing little things like that. But yeah, with weddings, there's nothing else you can do. You can just kind of sit back and wait until you get an inquiry. So the content creation side is definitely saving my day-to-days because now my day-to-days are, content planning. So like brainstorming and ideas. And then you have the days where I actually record the videos. Then you also have the days where I actually edit the videos. So that takes up like a whole day normally.
Mhm.
And that's my day. Like we homeschool our kids too. So like I'll go downstairs with the kids, help out with a little bit of homeschooling for like an hour. I usually try and get up and work out and then it's back to the office, brainstorming. recording a video, finding something new, editing the video, and that's every day, pretty much. Yeah.
Mhm. Do you find that doing the content creation is more of like a personal fulfillment aspect of things, or is it actually a moneymaker in the business when there are gaps in wedding photography, kind of opportunities?
Yeah, it's definitely the money maker. Actually, pretty much 2020 solidified that because beforehand I was just teaching people because it was like I like to teach people, but in 2020 it really took off. It gave me a lot of the opportunities I have now, and it actually brings in the majority of the income, which is another reason why I'm not so stressed. Because most people, I mean, when you look at my Honeywood dashboard of what I've booked, and it sends you those emails every month, like this is what your month looked like, and it's
Yeah.
literally like zero.
I know
And you
I've done that before, and I'm like, "Oh my god." I mean, I
yeah,
have
you're
other
looking at it
aspects of my
like
business too, but, if that's your only income source, it's terrifying.
exactly, because that's I posted I like to be very transparent because, and it's like this in any industry. As an educator, people distrust you because you're quick to be like, "Let me show you how you can do a thing to make money." And then I'm
Mhm.
like, "Yeah, but the only reason you're making money is because 'cause you're showing me how to make money.
I
So does that mean you
so
know what you're doing?"
It's basically what one of the theories I have is that social media is becoming an MLM, but that's a conversation for a different day. I have to do more research on it, but I plan on doing a whole episode on this, but it's like it's weird. It's becoming a little
I agree.
pyramid scheme, if you will. I do love it. We both are content creators. Like, it's my favorite thing to do. I love sharing things, but it's getting a little wonky and weird out there. It's a little
Yeah,
weird.
so because of that, like, I'm very transparent with anyone who, like, follows me because I'm teaching photographers. It would be very easy for me to be like, "I could show you how to be a great photographer. Give me all your money." So I also like to be like, "Hey, look, I only booked 2 weddings this year, and I've made 0 money this month." And, like and so people are like, "Wow." And it helps too because a lot of photographers right now are feeling it. They're just like, "I must suck. I must be the absolute worst." And I'm like, "No, you're not, because look at me too. And if
Yeah.
you like hold me in any kind of regard, which I'm not a fan of that, but you know what I'm saying? Like, I know what it's like to see another photographer be like, oh my God, they're so good. Everything they do is great. They're
Mhm.
always working. And for me to be like, actually, no, hey, I'm out here struggling too. And then everyone's just like, oh my God, thank you for saying it. Cause everyone else is like, I'm booking so much. Everything is great. Like, no, it's a downturn
Mhm.
economy at the moment. Like people are
Yeah.
holding on to their money.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the benefits about more people like you and I who are sharing authentically is that the people who are full of shit are going to be called out more often than not. And it's sort of that's like the trend in business. They're looking for people who are genuinely good humans. So, I mean, it'll benefit us in the long run, but for right now, it's a little, things are a little maybe not so smooth sailing. But, either way, I guess just because you have such a unique story and you've overcome so much, and right, being a father of five and all that, like, is there any message or any little tidbit you want to share with aspiring photographers or entrepreneurs who feel like extremely overwhelmed by the challenges they feel right now, both right economically because things are a little shitty, but just in
Yeah.
general, managing creative, what would you call it, like creative ruts or anything like that?
It's it's always hard to say because I love giving encouragement talks, but, they very much sound easier said than done,
Mm-hmm.
but a lot of it really is just sticking to what you know you're doing and believing in yourself, and I it's like, "Oh, so" but, really, like, that's what's gotten me over the years. Because again, when I had my one-star review situation, which was about 2 years into my business, I almost quit. But I kept on. Now, at the time, I had a day job, and this is like practical knowledge. It's like, as much as you hate your day job, like hold on to it until you know you're ready. Like when I quit my job, it was getting to the point where photography and my job were kind of like taking away from each other. Like I
Mm-hmm.
knew in my heart of hearts that I could do well as a wedding photographer if I had the extra time that I'm not getting because I was at my day job. So take your time in the journey is a big part and be real with yourself about how well you feel that you're doing. And don't worry so much about risks. And again, this is all easier said. I hope people really feel this because, again, my biggest risk was I quit my day job and moved to a whole new market that I had never shot weddings in while having a family of 4 at the time on a single income. So, like, I took a huge leap of faith. Um, and it worked out because I had that same hunger of like, I need to make this work. So again, like believing in yourself and like having that hunger to be like, I I can do this. And then more practical, and I know it's not the easiest, but we ended up paying off our debt by 2020. This off a single income too. So that helps with the business a lot because my expenses, even as a family of 7, are like as low as we can make them. So when we have a downturn like I'm in now, while I am stressed, I know my bills are paid at least.
Mhm.
So I can wade the storm a little bit.
I appreciate and applaud you for sharing so openly and vulnerably about these things. I know it's not the easiest, and sometimes there's shame that's attached to it because you're like, again, like, even though you know it's bullshit when people say, "Oh, things look really nice and everything's perfect and money's coming in and this and that," it doesn't necessarily mean it's true, but that doesn't mean in the back of your head, the chatter in your head is saying something else. But I'm wondering, just because it seems like, again, there's twists and turn in the business. It's been good, and now it's been like so, and you're working through that. One final question I like to ask every guest, or newly asking, I've been changing up the way I kind of wrap these episodes up, is, has your life kind of turned out how you imagined it to be?
Such a good question. I would say no, but in the best of ways. Because even and me and my wife talk about that a lot. We just talk. That's when you have your best friend and you're in love. But we like to sit down and just like analyze things sometimes. And what's really funny is going back and be like, we've been together for like 15 years now. And it's like, do you remember 10 years? There's no way we would have ever even fathomed anything. Like, I had never really traveled before, right? My first big plane flight was from like North Carolina to Boston. So, here I am, Southern boy, raised in the South. Not super South. I was from a city in the South. So, not extra country, but, I'd never gone anywhere. And now I'm speaking at workshops in front of 200, 300, 400 people in like most of the states. I fly like at least once or twice every month. It's starting to become more international. Like I just went to Japan. I may be going to Europe at some point, Puerto Rico coming up soon. And it's like me speaking in front of people. I'm like not the best socially either. I'm like an extroverted introvert. So yeah, no, like it's the best. It's awesome. I'm like, wow, this is great. But net, like if I would go back in time and be like, hey, you're going to be speaking at workshops in front of like 300 people, I would just, like when someone tells you something that you can't even react to because it's just
Mhm.
so far over. That's what it would have been. I would have just been like, like you're making good money, your debt's paid off, like I would have just been like, because back then I was on one of those, like, you ever been in those times where you like ask your parents for like $5 so your account doesn't overdraft and then you get the overdraft? Like that was me. I was like, hey mom, can you give me literally $1.50 so I don't get that $75 like overdraft fee? And she'd be like, here's $50, calm down. I'm like, I just didn't want to go negative.
Mhm.
So yeah, it never, ever would have fathomed in the slightest that I would be where I'm at today. But
Yeah.
I'm so happy for it. I'm
Yeah.
hoping the next 10 years will be like that as well.
I'm sure it will. Especially, I think that, like, again, not to keep talking about entrepreneurship, but obviously we're both business owners. If I kept on the corporate track, I would not have been able to do the things that I'm doing
Yeah,
now.
it's a
It
very
just
like
and
a
it
slow.
exactly. And like that doesn't mean it's a bad track. Being a ladder climber isn't terrible, but it's for creative people who want to do big things and try everything. It's really
Yeah,
hard to do the things that you're aspiring to do when people are telling you you can't, or we don't do this here, or this process takes a year, or whatever. Or maybe when you go to college and get your MBA, like, stupid shit like that. So,
so
um,
many memories. I like know that. So like you're
trauma.
saying it, and I remember every meeting I had. I'm just like, oh. Yeah, it's risk takers. Entrepreneurs have some form of risk taking in them, and corporate is just it's very safe. And it's fine to
Mhm.
be safe. If you love being safe, do it. But if you just have that itch to like jump, like kids who'll there's always those kids who'll climb up to the top of the monkey bars and like jump off. Their
Yeah.
parents are like, "Oh my god!" Like it's those kids are the entrepreneurs. They're like, I can climb up here and jump off, and it's probably fine. And everyone else is like, you can break your leg, but they jump off and it's okay. And then everyone's like, wow, that's so cool. That's an entrepreneur. I feel like
That's a
everyone
pretty good
else they want to go
analogy.
on the swings and stuff, and that's fine and it's fun and it's great. And we all have to decide what our success is and what we want to do in our lives. But I want to jump off the monkey bars.
Yeah, let's see if we break our leg or if, we survive. It's
Yeah,
fine.
and sometimes you do break your leg and then it
Yeah.
heals back and you'll be okay.
Yeah. Yeah. But this has been really, really great, really fruitful. Thanks so much for sharing all your photography knowledge and, of course, some insight into the business and some of the struggles, right? The not so sexy things, but that are still worth it in the long run. For anyone listening, you can look at the show notes or our YouTube description to find anything about John, his handles, even learn from him on YouTube or purchase a course from him so you can be a photographer yourself. But John, thank you so much for coming on.
Awesome. Thank you.